I would be stunned if like Jed somehow like threads the needle and finds some sort of like guy that helps right now and next year and the year after that.
Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with Patrick Mooney. We're your Cubs beat writers for The Athletic and the host of this podcast, which covers the reeling Cubs. Patrick, you were there. I was off all week, and you saw the Cubs collapse out of the gate. They've gone 2-4. They needed to probably at minimum go 4-2. For Jed to reconsider here before, 5 days before the deadline. But this is a team that, I mean, call it what you want to. I know Craig Counsell sees it more as a gray area, but this team isn't buying at minimum. There's no reason to. They've shown no indication of a team that can compete. We've seen flashes, but frankly, it's not been good enough. There's a reason. I think last time I was on, I said I'm not, I'm intrigued, but I'm not buying in on the offense because I believe it's now 9 runs in 6 games. I mean, completely unacceptable offensive performance, especially with the way the pitching has performed.
I mean, the last Cubs game you covered, they hit like 6 home runs, right? And that was maybe this is the start of something. And even, Nico Horner, who's an extremely self-aware, intelligent individual, was still talking about that road trip. And he was like, I know, like, that was really meaningful for us. I'm sure you guys are sick of hearing about it. And it's like, yeah, like as good as they looked during that stretch heading into the break, they looked just as bad coming out of it. And Sahadev, you've seen these games over and over this year. There was nothing really new coming out, losing both Justin Steele starts. The first one, Steele didn't pitch as well. I think they were down 5 runs, like a couple innings into the post All-Star break stretch. I mean, just unacceptable. I think you see just how weak this lineup is. It doesn't matter how great the starting pitching is. And, the bullpen has finally come together. You're kind of, wondering, like, where was this in April and May? But basically it's come together in time to sell some guys, move some guys at the trade deadline. I think that even if the Cubs were a little better, I think that scenario could have taken place. But at this point, there's no reason to keep it together. They can't, as we've documented over and over, there's not a lot of pieces to move. And, I think just one thing, I'm glad you brought it up, of Craig Counsell's idea of that's a mistake to call it this or that. Like, yeah, dude, in Milwaukee, there was a lot more gray area. Or like in Tampa Bay, they're always simultaneously buying and selling. But Jed's 12 trade deadlines, you and I have covered all of them. They've always been buyers or sellers. Now, there's various degrees to that, but like this is a front office that picks a lane. It's a front office that is not like, I don't know, wildly creative with some of this stuff. Like, they're very rational, they're very measured, they have their approach. So like maybe they surprise all of us and do something far outside the box. But like, if you've been paying attention to the Cubs at the trade deadline, you know how they operate very, very broadly. And so that was one thing where I had to say, Craig, that's a bad take.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you can look at this roster and say there isn't much to sell, right? It's going to be bullpen pieces. Maybe, we hear Jameson Taillon's name out there. I think it'd be a mistake to move guys from the rotation. I think you try and keep as many pieces as you can that can help in 2025, unless you're getting bowled over. Unless, I know it is a seller's market, but we also know that teams just are, like you just described, Carter and Jed as very rational. That's how majority of the teams are. It doesn't seem like AJ Preller. First of all, AJ Preller doesn't have much to sell right now, and it doesn't seem like he's going to be the super crazy aggressive guy. And the Dodgers can be aggressive. Baltimore is a team that you'd love for them to be aggressive, but there's zero chance that they will be. That's just not how they behave. They've never shown that. That front office is known for being very calm and measured. They come from Houston, where they never made crazy bold moves, and I would be very surprised if they pay the type of price that is needed to get like an under control starter or something like that. They just don't do that. The prices should be high, and teams just don't pay for them anymore. They don't pay enough. The Dodgers are maybe one of those teams that would, so definitely listen if they come calling. But other than that, I just don't see it. San Diego isn't giving up like Ethan Salas or those type of prospects right now. So I'm not sure what they can do. It's a situation where they have to start thinking about 25. But when Counsell says what he says, I think I can see a scenario where they're still fine in the second half, and by that I mean
still bad.
Largely the same team, and where they tease you for a week or 10 days and say like, maybe, but they're not good enough. The issues have been exposed, and I think maybe that's for the best. You didn't need a fake run like last year. Last year, I thought, we've said this before. I've said this a lot. They performed better than the record, right? For 2 or 3 months or whatever it was. I always felt that way watching the team. I was like, they're better than their record. I've never really felt that way this year. I felt like there's more talent here. I thought they'd be better, but the way they're playing, this is bad baseball. And last year, it was like, this is a better team than the record suggests. I feel like they're not playing terribly. So it was a different feeling, even if some of the results early on were the same. And the big issue was the bullpen last year being overused and then exposed. This year, it's falls squarely on the offense. I don't think you can point to, you can point to early issues with the bullpen, like you said, but it's kind of come together. I don't know what, I would, the guys I would focus on as far as trade deadline goes. And I did talk to some people while I was on vacation, and it seemed like teams are hearing similarly. It's bullpen arms, right? And Drew Smiley makes a lot of sense. Expiring deal, quietly does really well, has been moved at deadlines before and helped teams win in the past. I think a lefty reliever is always valuable, even if he's not like a straight up lefty specialist. Hector Neris makes sense. He's finally looking good. I had a scout tell me that the splitter looks pretty nasty. He left one up yesterday and it got blooped, I think, into the outfield. That was, if you want to call that a mistake, you can call it a mistake. But the fastball does look hittable. It is hittable, but he walks a tightrope and always has for his career. The one guy I'm curious about now, if they move Smiley, do they also move Leiter? And then if they do move Leiter, how does Counsell tell us that they're still trying to, that wasn't a straight sell, right? Because you don't have anybody coming out of your bullpen that's supposed to that you can use for lefty pockets. You've downgraded your bullpen significantly. I wrote this before he came off the deadline, before he came off the IL. Those bad numbers that you were looking at, they're not as bad as how he was pitching. He was pitching well. He had a lot of bad luck. And now you're seeing just a little break and feeling 100%. He's a nasty reliever. He's a really good reliever. I believe he's under control for 2 more years beyond this. Is he even ARB? Was he even ARB?
Yeah, he has an ARB deal. I think it would be that he's 33 years old. He's a guy they had signed, to multiple minor league deals,
right.
And that there are going to be really good teams that are like, I want that guy for that matchup in that inning against that opponent.
Right.
I think that would be just get back to how this front office views relievers as very, very interchangeable. And I realize that's kind of a industry sort of standard, but the Cubs do seem to take it to an extreme at times.
Yeah, I mean, I look at his numbers. The ERA is the only thing that looks bad. He gets a ton of ground balls. He gets a ton of strikeouts. He doesn't walk too many guys. I mean, this guy's a really good reliever. If you can get a really good prospect for him, I guess it makes sense. But that would be, for me, the clearest indication that it's just solely focused on 25. And we can hear Craig Counsell say all he wants about don't look at it black and white. And I agree to an extent. I don't think you can look. I think there's no other way to look at it because Luke Little's out for the season. If Drew Smiley's gone, you don't have anybody in your bullpen that you use for lefty pockets. That's not a team that can compete. That's not a team that you look at and say like, oh, I get it. I see how you can do both here. But because he's so valuable, you're right. He's 33. You don't know when. He's got 2 more years after this, 25 and 26. He's a leader in the bullpen along with Neris. So you can lose veterans, but it's probably worth seeing what younger guys can do. And then you're going to have to backfill in the offseason. The offseason, we'll dig into it, but then reliever to get out lefties, power bat, beefing up the bench. I know,
Yes.
I think that's a huge thing. And then probably number 1 is you have to get a catcher. You have to.
Eric Kratz here from FT. I'm a former athlete that really pays attention to his routine. And AG1 every morning before my workouts is something that gets my day going.
Hey, Braun here. AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that delivers daily nutrients and gut health support, and it's backed by multiple research studies so you can trust what you're putting in your body.
Unlike other products which only test their ingredients in isolation, AG1 tests their formula as a whole.
Ready for this stat? 97% of people in a research study felt more energy after 30 days of drinking AG1. If I had to recommend one product to support whole body health, it's AG1, and that's why FT is excited to have them as a new partner. Starting your journey with AG1 is a win. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase at drinkag1.com/foul. That's drinkag1.com/FOUL. Go check it out, FT fam.
Yeah, and I go back to actually 2022 when the Cubs went 39-31 after the All-Star break. And if you remember, that is when they traded away David Robertson, Chris Martin, and Michael Givens. And you had a couple young pitchers pop up, and I get what Counsell is saying. And like you and I have both talked to him enough that like I get his general point. But like sitting in the interview room saying it's a mistake to, write this or that, just didn't really sit well with me, because clearly you're either like increasing your odds to make the playoffs or you're decreasing your odds to make the playoffs. And clearly by not acquiring more rental players, which we understand, I would say, of watching this team for this long, the way the schedule is set up too. I mean, we're past the 100 game mark at this point. It's not like there's half a season to go. I know the All-Star game was just last week, but we're like pretty deep into this at this point. And I get not wanting to sink more into this group, but like, I would be stunned if like Jed somehow like threads the needle and finds some sort of like, guy that helps right now and next year and the year after that. Like it's not really what this marketplace is anymore. Like you said, there aren't teams that like back the truck up. And I think I'm glad you brought up Taillon, because that's probably what I'll write for like the off day of, okay, you trade him for what? Like, is this piece going to help you next year? Like, I don't think you need another, A-ball outfielder, right? You don't need like some double-A guy who might not be a capable major league player like another 4 years from now. And, teams that are in it aren't looking to subtract guys that can help right now. And if you get rid of Taillon, just look at all the injuries the Cubs had on the pitching side this year. Like, are you really going to trust name a young pitcher to absorb the like 30 starts that Taillon's shown he can do year after year? after year, or you sign a free agent, and then with the cost of inflation, like it's going to be more than the deal that Taillon signed. It's going to obviously be for more years than 2 if it's a guy that you trust in the industry highly values. And like we both know, like Taillon's a grown up, like he's a professional, and he's someone who's been pretty honest about like this isn't good enough. And I don't know that subtracting that is a great idea. Obviously, he's not, and this goes back to the kind of cost of acquisition. Like he's probably not going to start the first game of a playoff series for a team. So I can see like both sides of that of, if you're the Cubs, why hang on to him if he's not like that guy? Or if you're the acquiring team, what are we going to give up for a guy who might start game 3 or game 4 or be like a 2 times through the order guy in a playoff game? But that, to me, I think that's the player that will define this trade deadline for the Cubs. Like if he stays, it's like, okay, there is a more reasonable path of, staying in it, going back at it again in 2025. But if he moves, I think that will be the one where you'd feel it in the clubhouse. You'd be taking away from Counsell like a real piece, not just kind of a bullpen guy here or there. Like that would be a significant subtraction that I think would be very revealing.
Yeah, right. And then we don't debate the black, what
what is a
doing
gray
at this.
area.
Yeah. But also they have to listen on everyone, right?
Yeah.
This isn't working. When it goes to this extent where it's just like nothing seems like it's going right as far as the 1-loss record. I think you have to listen to try and figure out, can you improve your team? There are, I've seen stuff about how Baltimore is willing to give up some of their current players on the roster, right? To open up space for younger players.
Mm-hmm.
I get that. I don't think that works so much for the Cubs. But maybe the Cubs need to think creatively and see if guys are willing to move, take down their trade deadlines or waive their trade deadlines,
Clauses, no trade clauses.
No trade clauses. Sorry, I'm recovering from a cold and my brain is clearly not functioning at 100%. But I don't know. We just talked about their, I don't know if they have that in them, if they're going to be able to swing a move that kind of surprises us all. If anything, I think they make the smaller moves now and look to really reload and change things up for 2025 in the offseason. One thing I think we all know for sure, right? And fans may not be 100% clear on this, but they intend on taking a step forward in 2025. There's no debate about that. What you see now, and I agree with you, Patrick, you trade Taillon, it looks really bad for 2025, but that just means that they have more work cut out for them in the offseason because they cannot go into 2025 saying like this roster is a step back, but we're looking to the future. We're going to be better in 26 and 27. That's when we really expect things to shine in on the north side. Anything like that that's a death knell for Jed Hoyer and the front office. Like you're begging for change. Then like Tom Ricketts, say what you will, but he's not. I can't imagine that he's going to be much more patient with this group, right? Like they likely have another year, but beyond that, they have to show real progress, and that has to come in the form of a team in the playoffs.
Yeah, and things can change, so quickly too. Of the Taillon trade idea, like as kind of game planning this out, like Max Fried was a name that was mentioned of like, oh, this is a guy, that keep an eye on him. It's like, and he's out with forearm issue now.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like it's great to think about. This is in a mailbag episode that'll be coming out soon of like Corbin Burns' name mentioned. Like, sure, great relationship with Craig Counsell, but he hired Scott Boras, and Scott Boras, I'm assuming, will be looking at Garrett Cole's deal, Steven Strasburg. So like stuff that the Cubs have just not historically done. And will this season shake them out of it? Yes, to that extent. I think it'd be disingenuous for us to be like, oh yeah, they're going to sign Corbin Burns and Juan Soto. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, this has fundamentally shaken like what they thought about this team. And I think we'll see, a reckoning of sorts, to use a Theo phrase, like coming out of this year. It's hard to imagine the roster staying intact, the coaching staff staying intact, the front office kind of going along on the same path. Like, I think everything is kind of up for grabs here, and that's why this trade deadline, even though the Cubs don't have great pieces to sell and they're not going to be adding, it still is very much like a front and center event that will show us a lot about where this team is at.
Yeah, Corbin Burns is going to be 30 in October, Patrick. Yeah, this front office spending the money that it's going to take to get Corbin Burns at age 30. I don't see that. Like, there are definitely pitchers on the market that I think they should be interested in, especially if they move a pitcher. I think offense, we all know it should be the primary focus. Bulking up the bullpen is always a need. But yeah, come on, 30-year-old Corbin Burns makes sense. I just don't see this front office ponying up the cash to get that Scott Boras contract done.
And I think you made a good point about the bench. And I think sometimes like people focus too much on like that one number 8 hitter against, one late inning at bat. But in terms of the overall talent level of this team, I think that's a fair criticism of just looking at, Ian Happ is having a really good season. He's a really good major league player. Like, is he a cleanup hitter? Like he was yesterday. I just don't think on a true World Series caliber team, I don't think he's batting cleanup. I mean, if you're one of those like game planning analysts or scouts from the other team looking at the Cubs, I mean, are you just kind of like half paying attention once you get past 1 or 2, 3 names? I mean, the middle to bottom of that lineup is just not at all imposing. And part of that is Dansby Swanson. Part of that is Cody Bellinger being injured. But even when he's healthy, he has not been the slugging, dynamic presence that the Cubs had hoped for. This was I think Jed called it the worst baseball and offense, worst offense in baseball for 2 months. Like, it's really hard. And I'm sure you've had these conversations with scouts as well, of just like, you don't look at this and be like, oh, this is like a truly terrible team. Like, the pitching has just been so good, particularly in the rotation, and the bullpen is like organized now, and they seem to have their act together on that side. But just when the offense is, I think Counsell used words like quiet, light, no pressure, like all that's like all those descriptors have applied to so many games this year that it's just hard to take them seriously.
Yeah, and the reality is offense is down all across the league, right? Every team is looking for offense at the deadline. But what they have are 1, 2, or 3 like absolute rocks in their lineup, right? Mm-hmm. So the teams like the 7 through 9 for most teams aren't pretty. You look at the Brewers, and while their offense is down from where it was early in the season, there's no like absolute dead spots. That's kind of the difference too, right? Like I don't like, especially without Yelich now, the Brewers aren't like this terrifying offense, but there's no really easy spots. The Cubs 7 through 9, 6 through 9, there's with Dansby Swanson not hitting, there's just too many easy spots in their lineup, right? And when I say that, it's not like they're 700 OPS guys. They're struggling. Some of them are struggling to get to 600 OPS. That's the issue. It's not that they're not. It's not that they're just like guys. They're bad offensive players, and the bench is. I like Miles Mastrobuoni's defense. I like his versatility. I think he's a quality player. He's not hitting. Dansby Swanson plays elite defense. He's missing pitches down the middle and can't hit heaters when challenged. Like this is a problem. Miguel Amaya's on a hot stretch and is up to it's still not good enough.
Yeah, he has a 595 OPS at this point.
Yeah, 72. He's worse than he's got a 72 weighted runs created plus. Okay, Dansby Swanson's at 80. Patrick Wisdom, one of your power bench guys, 87. Like Christopher Morel is in a horrific slump, 93. Nico Horner's at 98. Like Nico Horner doesn't crush the ball. He's usually around 100. He's not having a terrible season, but you need more pop in the lineup. You need more production in the lineup. It can't be like, I thought Seiya Suzuki would take a leap this year. He's kind of the same player he was. Good player, but not the guy you build around. Michael Busch is a very nice addition. Very good player. Like, it's nice to have Michael Busch, Seiya Suzuki, and Ian Happ. You need a star in this lineup that's a step above all three of those guys and makes it a little simpler, and then just pad it with some depth. I think we'll talk about this a lot more. We're going to have to, and we're going to probably have to dig into it in the second half. But Dansby Swanson and his offense, it can't be the same next year. It can't, and they have to figure out like what's going on there. Is this lingering knee issues? Is this just confidence and mechanics? What is it like? What's going on at the plate, and can it be fixed for next year? Otherwise, that's a major issue, right? Like 5 more years on the deal. Listen, elite defender at shortstop. This isn't Jason Hayward, because elite defense at right field doesn't impact the game like elite defense at shortstop, right? He's still an elite defender, but it cannot be this bad. A 95 weighted runs. If he had the same weighted runs created plus as Nico, it wouldn't be as awful. It just wouldn't be as big of a problem. People would still be complaining, I'm sure, but it wouldn't be as awful. Like that's still a really valuable player. I just don't know what you do there. I don't know what the solution is, but it has to change for next year. It can't be the same, because that's just one more spot in the lineup that's too easy to get out. You have to address the other issues, of course. You have to address catcher. You have to address the bench. You have to figure out what's going on at third base. But Dansby Swanson is there. He's going to be your shortstop. So you got to figure out how to fix that. You got to figure out what the offseason plan is for him and how he gets back to being just at least an average offensive player.
Yeah, and you'll be in Kansas City. I'll be in Cincinnati at some point during this trip. It's possible that Cody Bellinger will be activated. That is another one where, look, is he going to opt in to next year? Is he going to be a $30 million player? I think you like having him on your team. There's a lot he brings to the table, but it's not exactly what they hope for. And maybe this is kind of a weird year with injuries or whatever. I mean, he's had several over the course of his career, so that couldn't have been like a total shock. And some of it's freak stuff. You get hit by a 97-mile-an-hour fastball like in your hand, like, yeah, you're gonna wind up on the injured list. But just a really weird mix, and just I think this year has also exposed like how close are any of these hitters in the upper levels. I think that has been, not saying none of these guys will impact the team eventually, but clearly there was not, a Kyle Schwarber walking through the door the way he did in 2015, or even Ian Happ in 2017, the way he impacted that group. Like, when you have the worst offense in baseball by your own admission, and there isn't really a lot bubbling up, it's not a good sign for like where things are going. And that, I think, will be interesting too, of how some of the playing time is redistributed in August and September. Are they going to give any of these guys run? Like, have they even earned it? And also this enormous gap between Iowa and the majors. Like, have they closed? Is there a way to close any of that at all? And so that's why I know Counsell will have the same reaction on his face no matter what happens at the trade deadline. But I do think it'd be really interesting to hear kind of what he has to say and about just how healthy or not this organization really is.
Yeah, Patrick, we'll have one more podcast, I believe, before the deadline, and then the one after that should be right after it. So we'll have a little clearer. Obviously, we'll know what's going on. Probably by the time we talk to listeners again, there'll be at least, I would assume there's going to be a move this weekend. Like, you don't do them all on the 30th. Maybe I'm wrong. But there's a good chance there'll be a move consummated either the next time we talk to you or soon after that. But this team needs to shake things up. It needs to look different. Unfortunately, we're already talking about 2025 and what to expect for that. But not what we expected to be talking about at this time. But it's been 3 months of this now. It's been 3 months of us talking about this, of them going in the wrong direction. They did this to themselves. The offense fell apart. This is the team that was built. It was a team that won 83 games last year and should have taken a step forward. 2 really good additions, and somehow it's a worse team. It's a very, very odd way to see it unfold, but it's what happened, and it's the reality Jed and Carter face, and that they've got to figure out a way to fix it. We'll be back at you early next week. Plenty of trade talk and probably trade analysis to do. Thanks for listening. This is Northside Territory. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite platforms there, and give us love if you would, please. Subscribe to The Athletic, and keep on listening. Thanks for listening. Take care, everyone.